Chapter contents: Early Britain, the Middle Ages, the Tudors and Stuarts, a global power, the 20th century Britain since 1945. In this chapter, you will learn about British history, starting from the Stone Age. The initial sections focus on the various populations that arrived in Britain, shaping its language, culture, and religions. Following this, the focus shifts to the development of the monarchy, the church, and parliament. Major battles and significant periods are covered, including the English Civil War, the Industrial Revolution, and the British Empire. The chapter details the impact of the First and Second World Wars. The post-war section concentrates on the creation of the modern welfare state, the governments of the UK, and devolution in Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. Make sure that you understand the relationship between the monarchy and parliament, the historical tensions between Protestants and Catholics, and the dynamic between Britain and the colonies of its empire. Consider how the right to vote developed over time. You should also ensure you are familiar with each of the key figures described. You will need to know about the significant acts of Parliament and other major events. You should also be aware of the key dates mentioned in this chapter. Early Britain. The first people to live in Britain were hunter-gatherers, in what we call the Stone Age. For much of the Stone Age, Britain was connected to the continent by a land bridge. People came and went, following the herds of deer and horses which they hunted. Britain only became permanently separated from the continent by the Channel about 10,000 years ago. The first farmers arrived in Britain 6,000 years ago. The ancestors of these first farmers probably came from Southeast Europe. These people built houses, tombs, and monuments on the land. One of these monuments, Stonehenge, still stands in what is now the English county of Wiltshire. Stonehenge was probably a special gathering place for seasonal ceremonies. Other Stone Age sites have also survived. The World Heritage Site of Stonehenge, Skara Brae on Orkney, off the north coast of Scotland, is the best preserved prehistoric village in northern Europe, and has helped archaeologists to understand more about how people lived near the end of the Stone Age. Around 4,000 years ago, people learned to make bronze. We call this period the Bronze Age. People lived in roundhouses and buried their dead in tombs called round barrows. The people of the Bronze Age were accomplished metalworkers who made many beautiful objects in bronze and gold, including tools, ornaments, and weapons. The Bronze Age was followed by the Iron Age, when people learned how to make weapons and tools out of iron. People still lived in roundhouses, grouped together into larger settlements, and sometimes defended sites called hill forts. A very impressive hill fort can still be seen today at Maiden Castle, in the English county of Dorset. Most people were farmers, craft workers, or warriors. The language they spoke was part of the Celtic language family. Similar languages were spoken across Europe in the Iron Age, and related languages are still spoken today in some parts of Wales, Scotland, and Ireland. The people of the Iron Age had a sophisticated culture and economy. They made the first coins to be minted in Britain, some inscribed with the names of Iron Age kings. This marks the beginnings of British history. The Romans. Julius Caesar led a Roman invasion of Britain in 55 BC. This was unsuccessful, and for nearly 100 years Britain remained separate from the Roman Empire. In AD 43, the Emperor Claudius led the Roman army in a new invasion. This time, there was resistance from some of the British tribes, but the Romans were successful in occupying almost all of Britain. One of the tribal leaders who fought against the Romans was Boudica, the Queen of the Iceni in what is now eastern England. She is still remembered today, and there is a statue of her on Westminster Bridge in London, near the Houses of Parliament. Areas of what is now Scotland were never conquered by the Romans, and the Emperor Hadrian built a wall in the north of England to keep out the Picts, ancestors of the Scottish people. Included in the wall were a number of forts. Parts of Hadrian's wall, including the forts of Housesteads and Vindolanda, can still be seen. It is a popular area for walkers and is a UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, World Heritage Site. The Romans remained in Britain for 400 years. They built roads and public buildings, created a structure of law, and introduced new plants and animals. It was during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD that the first Christian communities began to appear in Britain. The Anglo-Saxons. The Roman army left Britain in AD 410 to defend other parts of the Roman Empire and never returned. Britain was again invaded by tribes from northern Europe, the Jutes, the Angles, and the Saxons. The languages they spoke are the basis of modern-day English. Battles were fought against these invaders, but, by about AD 600, Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were established in Britain. These kingdoms were mainly in what is now England. The burial place of one of the kings was at Sutton Hoo in modern Suffolk. This king was buried with treasure and armor, all placed in a ship which was then covered by a mound of earth, a helmet from the time of the Anglo-Saxons and Vikings. Parts of the west of Britain, including much of what is now Wales, and Scotland, remained free of Anglo-Saxon rule. The Anglo-Saxons were not Christians when they first came to Britain, but, during this period, missionaries came to Britain to preach about Christianity. Missionaries from Ireland spread the religion in the north. The most famous of these were St. Patrick, who would become the patron saint of Ireland, and St. Columba, who founded a monastery on the island of Lona, off the coast of what is now Scotland. St. Augustine led missionaries from Rome, who spread Christianity in the south. St. Augustine became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. The Vikings. The Vikings came from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. They first visited Britain in AD 789 to raid coastal towns and take away goods and slaves. Then, they began to stay and form their own communities in the east of England and Scotland. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in England united under King Alfred the Great, who defeated the Vikings. Many of the Viking invaders stayed in Britain, especially in the east and north of England, in an area known as the Danelaw. Many place names there, such as Grimsby and Scunthorpe, come from the Viking languages. The Viking settlers mixed with local communities and some converted to Christianity. Anglo-Saxon kings continued to rule what is now England, except for a short period when there were Danish kings. The first of these was Nut, also called Canute. In the north, the threat of attack by Vikings had encouraged the people to unite under one king, Kenneth MacAlpin. The term Scotland began to be used to describe that country. The Norman Conquest. In 1066, an invasion led by William, the Duke of Normandy, in what is now northern France, defeated Harold, the Saxon king of England, at the Battle of Hastings. Harold was killed in the battle. William became king of England and is known as William the Conqueror. The battle is commemorated in a great piece of embroidery, known as the Bayeux Tapestry, which can still be seen in France today. Part of the Bayeux Tapestry. The linen cloth is nearly 70 meters, 230 feet, long and is embroidered with colored wool. The Norman Conquest was the last successful foreign invasion of England and led to many changes in government and social structures in England. Norman French, the language of the new ruling class, influenced the development of the English language as we know it today. Initially, the Normans also conquered Wales, but the Welsh gradually won territory back. The Scots and the Normans fought on the border between England and Scotland. The Normans took over some land on the border but did not invade Scotland. William sent people all over England to draw up lists of all the towns and villages. The people who lived there, who owned the land and what animals they owned were also listed. This was called the Domesday Book. It still exists today and gives a picture of society in England just after the Norman Conquest. Check that you understand the history of the UK before the Romans. The impact of the Romans on British society. The different groups that invaded after the Romans. The importance of the Norman invasion in 1066. Study Guide. Early Britain. The Stone Age. Britain was still connected to the continent of Europe until about 10,000 years ago. People were hunters-gatherers and followed the herds of horses and deer which provided their food and clothing. The first farmers arrived in Britain 6,000 years ago. They built houses, tombs, and monuments such as Stonehenge in Wiltshire. Skara Brae on Orkney, off the north coast of Scotland, is the best preserved prehistoric village in northern Europe. The Bronze Age. About 4,000 years ago, people learned to make bronze. They made many beautiful objects in bronze and gold, including tools, ornaments, and weapons. They lived in roundhouses and started to gather together in villages. The Iron Age. People learned how to make weapons and tools out of iron. Villages grew larger and hill forts such as Maiden Castle, in Dorset, were built for defense. People at this time spoke a type of Celtic language that is related to Welsh and Gaelic. They made the first coins in Britain as the economy developed. Find out. Where did the first farmers come from? How has Skara Brae helped archaeologists? Where did people bury their dead in the Bronze Age? What occupations did people have in the Iron Age? The Romans. The Romans invaded Britain in AD 43 and remained for 400 years. Boudica, the queen of the Iceni, in what is now eastern England, fought against the Romans. The Romans never succeeded in conquering all of Scotland, and Hadrian's wall was built to keep out the Picts, ancestors of the Scottish people. The Romans built roads and public buildings, created a structure of law, and introduced new plants and animals. During the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, the first Christian communities began to appear in Britain. A statue of Boudica stands on Westminster Bridge in London. Find out. How long were the Romans in Britain? Why is Hadrian's Wall attractive to tourists? Where will you find a statue of Boudica? The Anglo-Saxons. When the Roman army left in AD 410, Britain was invaded by the Jutes, Angles, and Saxons. The languages they spoke are the basis of modern-day English. By about AD 600, Anglo-Saxon kingdoms were established in Britain. The Anglo-Saxons were not Christians, but the country was gradually converted when missionaries came to Britain to preach about Christianity. Saint Augustine led missionaries from Rome and became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. Find out. Why did the Romans leave Britain? Where and how was one of the Anglo-Saxon kings buried? Who spread Christianity to the north and south of Britain? The Vikings. The Vikings from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden first visited Britain in AD 789 to raid coastal towns and take away goods and slaves. They began to settle and form their own communities in the east of England and Scotland, but were defeated in England by King Alfred the Great. Many of the Vikings decided to live in Britain. The Viking settlers mixed with local communities and some converted to Christianity. In the north, Viking attacks encouraged the people to unite under one king, Kenneth MacAlpin. The term Scotland began to be used to describe that country. Find out. What was the Danelaw? Who was the first Danish king to rule England? The Norman Conquest. In 1066, William, Duke of Normandy, defeated Harold, the Saxon king of England, at the Battle of Hastings. Harold was killed in the battle. William became King of England and is known as William the Conqueror. The Bayeux Tapestry commemorates the battle and can still be seen in France today. The Norman Conquest was the last successful foreign invasion of England. It led to many changes in government and social structures in England. The English language today shows the influence of Norman French. Find out. What impact did the Norman Conquest have on Wales and Scotland? What is the Domesday Book and how was its content collected? Here's a summary of early British history, perfect for life in the UK test prep, but with a more engaging twist. Early Britain, a whirlwind tour of who came, who stayed, and what they left behind. Ever wondered how Britain got to be, well, Britain? Let's dive into the fascinating, and sometimes brutal, history of early inhabitants, invaders, and the legacies they left that still shape the UK today. 1. The Stone Age, when Britain was still attached. Until 10,000 years ago, imagine a time before the English Channel existed. Hunter-gatherers roamed what is now Britain, following herds of animals for food and clothing. Then, around 6,000 years ago, the first farmers arrived, bringing with them a revolution in how people lived. They built amazing things, houses, tombs, and colossal monuments like Stonehenge, which still stands majestically today. Off the coast of Scotland, you can still visit Skara Brae, an incredibly well-preserved prehistoric village that gives us a peek into their daily lives. 2. The Bronze Age, getting crafty with metal. Around 4,000 years ago, suddenly, things got shiny. People discovered how to make bronze, leading to beautiful tools, ornaments, and weapons. They lived in cozy roundhouses and buried their dead in distinct round barrows. These were true metalworking masters. 3. The Iron Age, forts, farmers, and first coins. Next up, iron. This stronger metal changed everything. Villages grew, and impressive hill forts, like Maiden Castle in Dorset, were built for defence. People spoke Celtic languages, related to modern Welsh and Gaelic and, for the first time, started minting coins, a sign of a developing economy. This is where British history, as we know it, truly begins. 4. The Romans, 400 years of roads, laws, and resistance. AD 43 to 410, enter the Romans. After an initial failed attempt by Julius Caesar, Emperor Claudius successfully invaded in AD 43. They stayed for 400 years, leaving an indelible mark. Ever heard of Boudica? This fierce queen of the Iceni famously rebelled against them, and has a statue on Westminster Bridge today. The Romans built incredible roads, grand public buildings, established a system of law, and even introduced new plants and animals. And yes, they built Hadrian's Wall to keep out the Picts in Scotland, a stunning UNESCO World Heritage Site today. Christianity also began to appear during their rule. 5. The Anglo-Saxons. The birth of English. AD 410 onwards, when the Roman army packed up and left in AD 410, Britain was open for new invaders. The Jutes, Angles, and Saxons arrived from northern Europe. Their languages are the basis of modern-day English. Pretty significant, right? Anglo-Saxon kingdoms flourished, and a major shift occurred as missionaries from Rome, like St. Augustine, the first Archbishop of Canterbury, and Ireland, like St. Patrick and St. Columba, gradually converted the country to Christianity. Don't forget the incredible treasures found at the Sutton Hoo burial site, a glimpse into an Anglo-Saxon king's final journey. 6. The Vikings, raiders, settlers, and the rise of Scotland. AD 789 onwards, next, the longboats appeared. Vikings from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden initially raided coastal towns for goods and slaves. But soon, they started settling, especially in the east of England, the Danelaw, full of Viking place names. King Alfred the Great famously fought them off, uniting Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. In the north, the Viking threat actually spurred unity, leading to Kenneth MacAlpin becoming king and the term Scotland beginning to be used for the country. Fun fact, there was even a short period of Danish kings in England, with Canute being the most famous. 7. The Norman Conquest. 1066, the last successful invasion. Fast forward to 1066, a date every Brit knows. William, Duke of Normandy, sailed across the Channel and defeated Harold, the Saxon King of England, at the Battle of Hastings. Harold was killed, and William became William the Conqueror. This wasn't just another invasion, it was the last successful foreign invasion of England and completely reshaped the government, social structures, and even the English language, adding a lot of Norman French. If you want to see the epic story in fabric, check out the Bayeux Tapestry. William also commissioned the Domesday Book, a detailed survey of England, which still exists today and offers an amazing snapshot of the country right after the conquest. Key takeaways for your test. Stone Age, hunter-gatherers, first farmers, Stonehenge, Skara Brae. Bronze Age, metalworking, roundhouses. Iron Age, iron tools, hill forts, Celtic languages, first coins. Romans, invasion AD 43, 400 years, Boudica, Hadrian's Wall, roads, law, Christianity. Anglo-Saxons, invaded AD 410, basis of English language, Christian conversion, St. Augustine, St. Columba. Vikings, raids and settlements, Alfred the Great, Danelaw, Kenneth MacAlpin, Scotland. Norman Conquest, 1066 William the Conqueror, Battle of Hastings, Bayeux Tapestry, Domesday Book, last successful invasion of England. Ancient Figures Extravaganza, 55 BC, Julius Caesar. I came, I saw, I didn't quite conquer. A Roman general who attempted an invasion of Britain but somehow didn't quite pull it off, but hey, he's remembered for being the first to go, so that's something, right, Caesar? AD 43, Emperor Claudius. Caesar's debt. I'll pay it. The astute emperor who successfully conquered Britain, achieving what Caesar couldn't thanks to him. Britain became part of the Roman Empire. Caesar probably cheered from the afterlife, or so they say. Queen Boudica. I hate you, Romans. An Icenian queen whose rage against Roman rule exploded. This super cool female warrior led a rebellion that made the Romans tremble. She was eventually suppressed, but her brave figure lives on as a legend. Emperor Hadrian. Walls make everything better. A Roman emperor who built Hadrian's Wall in the north to deal with northern barbarians. It was probably a polite way of saying, please stay on your side. He probably never imagined it would become a tourist attraction 2,000 years later. Please be careful not to misunderstand here. Sutton Hoo is the name of a place in Suffolk, England. While it's not definitively known who was buried in this ship burial, the most prominent theory suggests it was Raedwald, King of East Anglia. Missionary St. Patrick. I'm going to turn Ireland Christian. The patron saint of Ireland, who single-handedly spread Christianity throughout the land, he reportedly explained the Holy Trinity using a shamrock. What a masterful presenter. Missionary Street, Columba. I'll evangelize in Scotland too. An Irish missionary who founded a monastery on the island of Iona in Scotland along with St. Patrick, he contributed to the Christianization of the North. Maybe they had a friendly competition who can spread it further. Missionary St. Augustine. I brought the authentic Christianity straight from Rome. A missionary sent from Rome who spread Christianity in England, an elite who became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. Wonder if people said, "Ah, the real deal from Rome." AD 789, King Alfred the Great. Vikings, go home. An Anglo-Saxon king and hero who defended England from the Vikings, also an intellectual king who promoted learning. If it weren't for him, England might be Vikingland today. King Kenneth MacAlpin. Scotland, unite. A key figure in the formation of Scotland, often considered its first king, he united the Picts and Scots to counter the Viking threat. Did he convince them with everyone, if we don't get along, the Vikings will get us? King Nut, Canute. I am king, even the sea obeys me. A Danish king who became king of England during the Viking Age. There's a famous anecdote about him ordering the tide to stop, proving even power has its limits. A surprisingly profound king who taught us a lesson about humility. 1066, William the Conqueror. England is mine. The Duke of Normandy who conquered England in the Norman Conquest. He defeated King Harold at the Battle of Hastings and brought about huge changes in England. Thanks to him, or because of him, we have many French-derived words in English and feudalism. And he created the super-detailed Domesday Book, showing his meticulous side. I know exactly who owns what. A slightly intimidating king, perhaps. Harold. My reign was short-lived. The last Anglo-Saxon king of England killed in the Battle of Hastings against William the Conqueror. His death symbolized the end of the Anglo-Saxon era and the beginning of the Norman period. He probably wished he could have been king for just a little longer. How did you like these ancient figures based on the provided material? Historical figures aren't just names, they each have their own dramatic stories, making them quite fascinating. Horse racing has a rich and extensive history in Britain, with evidence suggesting its presence as far back as Roman times. This ancient tradition has evolved significantly, becoming a deeply ingrained part of British culture and sporting heritage. While the Anglo-Saxon epic poem Beowulf, which recounts its heroes' valiant battles against monstrous foes, might seem unrelated to horse racing, it stands as a testament to the enduring power of ancient narratives. Just as Beowulf continues to be translated and studied in modern English, keeping alive stories from a distant past, so too does horse racing maintain its historical roots while adapting to contemporary times. This engaging journey through early Britain should give you a solid foundation for your life in the UK. Good luck!